Welcome. This is a quiet history of George Washington. You do not need to remember dates. You do not need to follow closely. The story will move slowly. The voice will remain gentle. If your thoughts drift, that is perfectly fine. Tonight, we begin in colonial America, not in moments of conflict, not in moments of fame, but in the quiet world where George Washington first lived. In the early 1700s, the colony of Virginia was shaped by the land itself. Wide fields stretched across rolling hills. Rivers moved steadily toward the sea. Forests covered much of the countryside. Most people lived simple, rural lives. They farmed the land. They raised animals. They followed the changing seasons. Travel was slow. News moved slowly. Life followed the rhythm of daylight and weather. This was the world George Washington was born into. George Washington was born on February 22nd, 1732. His family lived near the Potomac River in Virginia. His father, Augustine Washington, owned farmland and worked as a planter. His mother, Mary Ball Washington, managed the household and cared for the children. George was one of several siblings. Family life was structured and practical. Children helped with daily work. They learned responsibility early. The household followed steady routines. Mornings began with chores. Evenings ended with rest. George's childhood was shaped by the natural world. He spent much of his time outdoors. He observed the land. He watched the seasons change. Spring brought planting. Summer brought growth. Autumn brought harvest. Winter brought rest. Life followed this steady cycle. There was comfort in routine. George Washington did not attend a university. His education was practical and focused on daily needs. He learned reading, writing, basic mathematics. Much of his learning came through observation. He watched adults work. He listened carefully. He practiced useful skills. Education was steady, not rushed. When George was young, his father passed away. This changed his family's life. George took on more responsibility. He helped manage land. He assisted with business matters. He supported his family. These duties taught him discipline. They shaped his calm, careful nature. Daily life on a Virginia farm required steady work. Mornings began early. Tasks included feeding animals, planting crops, repairing tools, managing supplies. Work followed a predictable rhythm. There was no hurry. The land set the pace. As a teenager, George Washington learned how to survey land. Surveying meant measuring property boundaries. This work required careful observation, accurate measurement, long days outdoors. Washington traveled through forests and along rivers. He learned the geography of Virginia. He became familiar with the land. Surveying often took him far from home. He walked through wooded areas. He crossed streams and hills. The wilderness was quiet and wide. Travel was slow and steady. He learned patience through long journeys. Surveying provided Washington with income. It also built his reputation. People respected his careful work. He became known as reliable and disciplined. His work connected him to landowners and officials. Washington was not loud or dramatic. He was thoughtful, reserved. He listened more than he spoke. He valued order and structure. People trusted his steady nature. The American colonies were under British rule. Laws came from England. Trade depended on ships. Most colonists lived far from large cities. Daily life remained simple. At this time, there was no war for independence. Life focused on farming, trade, family, local communities. Washington grew up in this calm period. The land taught Washington many lessons. It taught patience, it taught planning, it taught resilience. Nature moved slowly. So did daily life. Evenings on the farm were peaceful. The sun lowered, the air cooled. Work ended for the day. Meals were shared quietly. Conversation was calm. The night brought rest. Year after year, the seasons repeated. Spring, summer, autumn, winter. Life followed this steady pattern. Washington grew within this rhythm, preparation for the future. Before he became a soldier, before he became a leader, before he became a president. George Washington lived a quiet, steady life. He learned through work. He learned through observation. His world was simple, but it prepared him for what would come. By the early 1750s, the American colonies were expanding westward. Beyond the settled farms and towns, there were vast forests, rivers, and mountain valleys. These lands were important for trade and travel. France and Britain both wanted control of them. Native American nations had lived on this land for generations. The region became a place of quiet tension, not loud conflict, not sudden change, just careful movement and growing concern. George Washington was still a young man. He had experience surveying land. He knew how to travel through forests and across rivers. Because of this, Virginia's leaders asked him to serve as a military officer. His role was simple at first. He carried messages. He observed the land. He reported what he saw. There was no hurry, only careful travel. Washington traveled slowly through the frontier. Forests stretched in every direction. Rivers moved steadily through the land. Paths were narrow. Travel was quiet. He walked. He rode on horseback. He paused often. The wilderness felt calm and wide. Birds moved through the trees. Wind passed through the leaves. The land itself felt steady. Washington carried messages between British and French leaders. These messages were formal and careful. They explained boundaries. They explained concerns. There were no loud demands, only written words. The goal was to avoid sudden conflict. Small forts were built along important routes. They were simple, wooden structures. Their purpose was to protect trade paths and settlements. Life at a fort was quiet. Soldiers maintained equipment. They prepared food. They stood watch. Most days were calm. Washington's first military experiences were not dramatic. They were careful and slow. He learned about planning routes, supplying food, keeping people organized. Leadership required patience. Decisions were made thoughtfully. As time passed, British and French interests began to overlap. Trade routes crossed, settlements expanded. Native American nations had their own concerns and alliances. The situation became more complex. Still, life on the frontier remained mostly quiet. Most days during the war were routine. Soldiers walked long distances, set up camps, prepared simple meals, rested when they could. The forest remained calm around them. Nature did not change its rhythm. Washington learned through experience. He observed how others led. He noticed what worked. He noticed what did not. He remained calm under pressure. He listened before acting. These qualities helped him grow as a leader. The conflict between Britain and France spread beyond America. Battles took place in Europe and other parts of the world. This made the war part of a larger global struggle. Still, daily life for Washington remained focused on small tasks: travel, observation, organization. By the early 1760s, the war began to slow. Agreements were made, borders shifted, the fighting gradually ended. Life returned to a steadier rhythm. Washington returned to Virginia. The forests remained. The rivers continued to flow. His experiences had shaped him. He was more confident, more experienced, but still calm. The French and Indian War had been a time of learning. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady growth through responsibility. Washington carried these lessons forward. The French and Indian War became an important period of learning for George Washington. He gained experience traveling long distances. He learned how to organize people and supplies. He observed how decisions were made under pressure. The war did not end suddenly. It slowly gave way to new agreements and changing borders. Washington returned to Virginia with a deeper understanding of leadership and responsibility. His future path would continue to build on what he had learned during these years. After completing his military service in the French and Indian War, George Washington returned to Virginia. The war had taken him through forests, rivers, and frontier settlements. When it ended, he returned to a quieter life, focused on land, agriculture, and household management. Washington resumed civilian life at Mount Vernon, the plantation he inherited through his family. The transition from military duty to agricultural management was gradual. There were no sudden changes. Instead, daily routines slowly replaced the structure of military service. Washington focused on organizing his land, overseeing workers, and improving productivity. His days became centered on observation, planning, and long-term care of the estate. Life moved at a steady pace. Mount Vernon was located along the Potomac River in Virginia. The plantation included farmland, forests, gardens, and working buildings. It was both a home and a place of business. Crops were grown to support the household and for trade. Tobacco had once been the main crop, but Washington later shifted to other forms of agriculture, including wheat and corn. The river provided transportation for goods. Boats carried supplies and produce to nearby markets. Mount Vernon operated as a self-contained community. Many people lived and worked there, each with specific roles and responsibilities. The plantation landscape was shaped by daily labor and long-term planning. Washington's days were structured and practical. He reviewed farm operations each morning. He inspected fields and buildings. He monitored livestock. Written records were kept carefully. Weather conditions were noted. Crop yields were tracked. Washington believed that careful observation improved productivity. He regularly adjusted plans based on soil conditions, weather patterns, and available labor. Work was steady rather than rushed. There was time to review details. There was time to plan ahead. Agriculture required long-term planning. Soil needed to be preserved. Fields had to be rotated to prevent exhaustion. Washington studied farming methods used in Britain and other colonies. He experimented with new techniques. He adjusted planting schedules. He tested new tools. he introduced crop rotation systems. His goal was to make the land more productive and sustainable. The land was treated as a long-term responsibility. Like many plantations in Virginia at the time, Mount Vernon relied on enslaved labor. Enslaved people performed much of the physical work on the farm. They planted crops, cared for livestock, and maintained buildings. They also worked in workshops, kitchens, and storage areas. Their labor supported the daily operation of the plantation. This system was part of the colonial economy. Washington managed labor assignments carefully. Work schedules followed seasonal patterns. This labor system shaped daily life at Mount Vernon. The plantation included more than farmland. There were living quarters, workshops, barns, and storage buildings. Daily life involved cooking, cleaning, maintenance, and repairs. The household followed a steady routine. Meals were prepared, supplies were managed, tools were maintained. Life continued through repeated daily tasks. The rhythm of work remained consistent. In 1759, George Washington married Martha Custis. Martha brought additional land, wealth, and responsibility into the household. Their marriage strengthened Washington's social and financial position. Together, they managed the plantation. Martha oversaw household matters. George focused on land management and business affairs. The partnership allowed Mount Vernon to operate more efficiently. Running a plantation required careful financial planning. Washington kept detailed records of expenses and income. He tracked crop sales, purchases of supplies, and household costs. Trade networks connected Mount Vernon to markets along the Atlantic coast. Financial organization helped maintain stability. Washington believed careful accounting was essential for long-term success. Washington participated in local social activities. He attended gatherings and community events. He hosted visitors at Mount Vernon. These events followed formal customs. Social connections were important for business and politics. Conversations often focused on agriculture, trade, and local affairs. Each season brought different responsibilities. Spring focused on planting. Summer involved maintenance of crops. Autumn brought harvest. Winter allowed time for planning, repairs, and record-keeping. The life as a planter required organization. Days followed routines. Tasks were repeated. Work was steady and methodical. Washington's leadership was practical and calm. He focused on efficiency and long-term planning. Although focused on plantation life, Washington remained aware of colonial affairs. He followed political developments in Britain and the colonies. He stayed informed about laws and policies. His experience managing land and people would later influence his leadership in national matters. Washington's years at Mount Vernon shaped his discipline and organization. He learned to manage resources. He learned to plan for the future. These skills became important in later responsibilities. The planter years were steady, practical, and structured. By the early 1760s, life in the American colonies began to shift. Britain had won the French and Indian War, but the cost of the conflict was high. To recover financially, the British government introduced new taxes on the colonies. These taxes were intended to help pay for military expenses. Many colonists, however, were unhappy with being taxed without having representation in Parliament. This disagreement created growing tension between Britain and the colonies. Several new laws affected daily life in the colonies. The Stamp Act placed taxes on printed materials. The Townshend Acts taxed goods such as tea, paper, and glass. These measures increased frustration among colonists. Merchants, farmers, and landowners all felt the effects. Public discussions about rights and governance became more common. George Washington followed these developments closely. He read newspapers and letters. He discussed political issues with neighbors and fellow landowners. At first, Washington hoped for peaceful solutions. He believed disagreements could be resolved through discussion and compromise. However, tensions continued to grow. Washington became more involved in colonial government. He served in the Virginia House of Burgesses. This group represented local interests and debated British policies. Meetings were formal and structured. Members discussed laws, taxes, and colonial rights. Washington listened carefully and participated in discussions. British trade restrictions affected colonial businesses. Imports and exports were closely regulated. This limited economic freedom. Many colonists felt these controls were unfair. Washington experienced these challenges as a landowner and trader. Economic concerns added to political frustrations. Town meetings and public gatherings became more frequent. People discussed British policies. Pamphlets and newspapers shared opinions. Some colonists supported resistance. Others preferred loyalty to Britain. The colonies were not united in their views. Leaders in several colonies began to call for cooperation. Committees were formed to share information. Colonial representatives met to discuss common concerns. The goal was to present a united voice. Washington supported these efforts. He believed cooperation could protect colonial rights. British troops were stationed in colonial cities. This presence increased unease. Incidents between soldiers and civilians occurred. While not constant, these encounters added to public concern. Trust between Britain and the colonies continued to weaken. Washington remained cautious. He valued order and stability. He hoped conflict could be avoided. However, he also believed colonial rights were important. His views gradually shifted toward supporting stronger resistance. Colonial leaders began preparing for possible conflict. Militias trained regularly. Supplies were gathered. Meetings became more focused on defense. Washington observed these preparations carefully. He understood their significance. Representatives from the colonies met to discuss their shared concerns. These meetings allowed leaders to coordinate their responses to British actions. Washington attended as a delegate from Virginia. Discussions were formal and deliberate. The focus remained on unity and communication. The movement toward revolution was not sudden. It developed over many years. Laws, debates, and economic pressures all contributed. Washington's role evolved with these changes. He moved from observer to part. In 1775, representatives from the American colonies met for the Second Continental Congress. Armed conflict had already begun between colonial militias and British forces in Massachusetts. The colonies needed a leader to organize and command their growing military forces. George Washington was chosen to serve as commander of the Continental Army. His prior military experience, calm leadership style, and reputation for discipline made him a suitable choice. Washington accepted the role with a strong sense of responsibility. When Washington arrived to take command, the Continental Army was still forming. Many soldiers were volunteers. Supplies were limited. Training was uneven. Washington focused first on organization. He established clear rules of conduct. He emphasized discipline, order, and structure. His goal was to create a reliable fighting force. Daily life in the army followed a steady routine. Soldiers trained, equipment was repaired, food was prepared, guards were posted. Conditions were often difficult. Shelter was simple. Weather could be harsh. Despite these challenges, routines helped maintain stability. One of Washington's greatest challenges was supplying the army. Food, clothing, weapons, and medical supplies were often scarce. Washington worked closely with Congress and local governments to secure resources. He emphasized careful use of available supplies. Logistics became a major part of his leadership role. Washington believed discipline was essential for success. He encouraged regular training. He promoted clear chains of command. Soldiers learned how to march, follow orders, and work together. These efforts helped improve the Army's effectiveness over time. The Continental Army faced British forces in several early engagements. Some encounters were successful, others were challenging. Washington focused on preserving his army rather than seeking constant confrontation. He understood the importance of keeping the army intact. At times, Washington chose to retreat rather than risk heavy losses. These decisions were based on careful assessment of conditions. Preserving soldiers and supplies was a priority. Retreats allowed the army to regroup and remain active. Commanding the army required constant decision-making. Washington balanced military needs with political considerations. He communicated regularly with Congress. He reported on conditions, needs, and progress. His leadership style remained steady and deliberate. Keeping soldiers motivated was an ongoing challenge. Washington encouraged unity and purpose. He recognized the importance of morale in difficult times. Clear communication helped maintain confidence. The army often operated in harsh winter environments. Cold weather affected movement, health, and supplies. Washington focused on maintaining order and organization during these periods. Shelter and basic needs became priorities. As the war continued, support from other nations became important. France provided assistance to the American cause. This support helped strengthen the Continental Army. Washington worked within these alliances carefully and respectfully. The Revolutionary War lasted several years. Progress was gradual. There were periods of success and periods of difficulty. Washington remained focused on steady leadership throughout. Washington relied on detailed planning. He wrote letters. He consulted officers. He considered long-term strategies. Careful preparation guided many of his decisions. Over time, Washington earned the respect of many under his command. His calm presence provided stability. His commitment to duty was clear. Trust developed through consistency. Washington understood that victory would not come quickly. Patience became part of his leadership approach. He focused on endurance rather than speed. The war continued through many seasons. The army adapted. Leadership evolved. Washington remained committed to his role. Washington's time as commander of the Continental Army required organization, patience, and steady leadership. He guided a developing military force through a long and uncertain conflict. His approach emphasized discipline, planning, and perseverance. By the late 1770s, the American Revolutionary War had already lasted several years. The Continental Army had faced repeated hardships. Supplies were often limited. Food was not always available in sufficient quantities. Clothing wore thin with constant use. Medical care remained basic. Despite these difficulties, the army continued its efforts. Washington remained focused on maintaining organization, discipline, and unity among the troops. He understood that endurance was essential for long-term success. Washington did not seek constant large-scale battles. He believed the survival of the army was more important than winning every engagement. Preserving soldiers, equipment, and morale remained a priority. This strategy allowed the army to remain active even during difficult periods. Careful movement and positioning became central to Washington's approach. Support from foreign allies became increasingly important as the war continued. France provided military assistance, financial aid, and naval support to the American cause. French officers, soldiers, and ships helped balance British military strength. This assistance improved the Continental Army's ability to operate effectively. Washington worked closely with French commanders to coordinate movements and plans. Clear communication remained essential. Life in military camps followed a steady routine. Soldiers trained when possible. Equipment was repaired, food was prepared, guards were posted. Shelter remained simple. Weather often affected daily operations. Despite these conditions, routines provided structure. Structure helped maintain order. Order helped maintain morale. Washington emphasized discipline throughout the war. He believed order was necessary for effectiveness. Clear rules were enforced. Chains of command were respected. Discipline helped keep the army organized during uncertainty. Washington maintained regular contact with the Continental Congress. He reported on troop conditions. He requested supplies. He offered strategic recommendations. These communications helped coordinate military and political efforts. Supplying the army remained one of the greatest challenges. Transportation was slow. Resources were limited. Weather affected delivery routes. Washington worked with local governments to secure food and equipment. Logistics became a major part of his responsibilities. As the war progressed, attention shifted toward the southern colonies. British forces attempted to gain control of key regions. American and Allied forces responded with coordinated efforts. Washington monitored developments from a strategic distance. He adjusted plans based on changing conditions. Joint operations with French forces required careful planning. Different military traditions had to work together. Washington maintained respectful communication with Allied commanders. These partnerships strengthened the American position. In 1781, British forces under General Cornwallis were stationed at Yorktown, Virginia. American and French troops coordinated their movements. French naval forces helped block British escape routes by sea. American and French land forces surrounded the British position. Supplies to the British forces were limited. After a period of siege, British forces surrendered. This marked a major turning point in the war. The surrender at Yorktown significantly weakened British military efforts in North America. Public confidence in American independence increased. Although fighting did not immediately end everywhere, the momentum shifted. Negotiations began to move forward. Even after major victories, Washington focused on discipline. He emphasized respect for civilians. He encouraged soldiers to follow regulations. Order was viewed as essential for stability. Peace negotiations required patience. Representatives from the United States and Britain worked through diplomatic channels. Discussions involved territory, trade, and political recognition. Washington followed developments closely. He supported a careful, organized approach to ending the war. In 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed. Britain formally recognized the independence of the United States. The Revolutionary War officially came to an end. The new nation began the process of organizing its government and institutions. After the war, the Continental Army was gradually disbanded. Soldiers returned to civilian life. Washington oversaw the transition. He encouraged calm, orderly departures. His leadership helped prevent unrest during this period. With the war concluded, Washington returned to Mount Vernon. He resumed agricultural work. He focused on personal and family matters. For a time, his military responsibilities were complete. The United States now faced the task of building a stable government. Laws had to be created. Institutions had to be established. Cooperation among leaders was essential. Independence marked a beginning, rather than an ending. Washington's leadership during the war had emphasized patience, organization, and responsibility. He had guided a developing army through years of uncertainty. His calm approach shaped the nation's early direction. Independence was not achieved quickly. It required years of effort, careful planning, endurance, international cooperation. Washington's steady leadership remained central to the process. Victory had been achieved through patience, cooperation, and endurance. Washington's leadership emphasized structure and responsibility. The war had shaped the nation and its future leaders. After the Revolutionary War ended, the United States faced the challenge of building a stable national government. The Articles of Confederation had created a loose system with limited central authority. The federal government could not easily raise money, regulate trade, or enforce national laws. Economic problems, disagreements between states, and concerns about national security made many leaders believe change was necessary. In 1787, delegates from the states met in Philadelphia to revise the Articles of Confederation. This meeting became known as the Constitutional Convention. George Washington was chosen to preside over the convention. He did not lead the debates, but his presence provided stability, trust, and credibility. Delegates discussed how to balance power between large and small states, protect individual rights, and create an effective national government. The convention produced a new document called the United States Constitution. It created three branches of government: legislative, executive, judicial. The Constitution also established the office of president. The goal was to create strong leadership while preventing the concentration of too much power in one person. After the Constitution was approved by the states, the nation needed its first president. George Washington was widely respected across the country. His leadership during the Revolutionary War and his reputation for integrity made him a trusted figure. He was elected unanimously by the Electoral College. In 1789, George Washington took the oath of office in New York City. The ceremony was formal and simple. Washington promised to uphold the Constitution and serve the nation faithfully. This event marked the beginning of the federal government under the new system. As president, Washington had to build the executive branch from the ground up. He appointed advisors to manage foreign affairs, national defense, financial policy. These advisors formed the first presidential cabinet. The goal was to organize the growing responsibilities of the federal government. Washington understood that his actions would set examples for future presidents. He emphasized respect for the Constitution. He limited the use of executive power. He encouraged cooperation between branches of government. These early precedents helped define the role of the presidency. The new nation faced serious financial challenges. War debts needed to be addressed. Taxes had to be organized. Public credit had to be established. Washington supported plans to create a national bank and stabilize the economy. The United States had to define its role in world affairs. Washington favored neutrality in foreign conflicts. He believed the young nation needed time to grow stronger. Trade agreements and diplomatic relationships were developed carefully. Different political viewpoints began to form. Some leaders supported a strong federal government. Others preferred greater power for individual states. Washington encouraged respectful debate and compromise. He worked to keep the nation united despite disagreements. Washington served 2 terms as president. He focused on stability, order, and national unity. He avoided unnecessary conflicts. His leadership emphasized careful decision-making. After his second term, Washington chose not to seek re-election. This decision established the tradition of peaceful transfers of power. He believed leadership should be renewed over time. Washington's presidency helped shape the future of the United States. He balanced authority with restraint. He focused on organization, stability, and responsibility. The government he helped establish provided a foundation for future generations. After many years of military and political service, George Washington chose to step away from national leadership. He had served as commander of the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War. He had served 2 terms as the first president of the United States. By the late 1790s, Washington believed it was time to return to private life. He felt that leadership should not remain in the hands of one person for too long. His decision helped establish the tradition of peaceful transitions of power. Washington returned to his home at Mount Vernon in Virginia. The plantation had long been his personal residence. It was a place of farmland, gardens, and working buildings. Life there followed a steady routine. Washington oversaw agricultural work. He reviewed financial records. He met with managers and workers. Daily responsibilities were practical and structured. Washington's retirement was active but calm. He walked the grounds of Mount Vernon. He inspected crops and livestock. He spent time reading and writing letters. Visitors sometimes arrived to speak with him. These visits were formal and respectful. Conversations focused on national affairs, farming, and personal matters. Retirement allowed Washington to live at a slower pace. Even after leaving office, Washington remained highly respected. Many Americans viewed him as a symbol of national unity. Political leaders still sought his advice. Washington offered guidance carefully. He preferred stability, moderation, and thoughtful decision-making. Before leaving office, Washington shared his views on the future of the nation. He warned against excessive political division. He believed strong party conflict could weaken the country. Washington encouraged cooperation among citizens and leaders. He also advised caution in foreign affairs. He believed the United States should avoid unnecessary involvement in international conflicts. This guidance influenced American policy for many years. Washington believed unity was essential for the country's stability. He encouraged Americans to think beyond regional and political differences. His goal was to support long-term national strength. He viewed cooperation as more important than competition between groups. In the final years of his life, Washington remained involved in managing his estate. He continued to follow national events. He maintained correspondence with political figures. As he aged, his health slowly declined. Daily routines became quieter. George Washington died on December 14, 1799. He was 67 years old. News of his death spread across the nation. Public ceremonies were held in his honor. Many Americans reflected on his long service and leadership. Washington was remembered as a leader who guided the country through its earliest challenges. He had led during war. He had led during peace. His leadership style emphasized responsibility and restraint. Over time, Washington became known as the father of his country. This title reflected his role in shaping the United States. His influence extended beyond specific policies. He helped establish traditions of leadership, service, and stability. Washington's legacy can be seen in many aspects of American government. The structure of the presidency, the peaceful transfer of power, the emphasis on national unity. These principles continued long after his lifetime. George Washington's life followed a pattern of service, followed by restraint. He accepted leadership when needed. He stepped away when the time was right. This balance became a defining part of his historical reputation. Washington's story ended quietly. There were no dramatic final acts, only the steady conclusion of a long life of service. His influence remained through the nation he helped build.